So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Open Project Night, hosted by Impact Hub Houston in partnership with Sketch City. My name is Michelle Avalos, and I am the Director of Operations at Impact Hub Houston. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, we are a locally rooted, globally connected network of change makers, social entrepreneurs, and impact supporters. And Open Project Night is actually an event that we used to do in person every month. It happens at impact hubs across the world. And it is a monthly event with the purpose to connect passionate people who are working on projects, ventures, and collaborations to improve the resilience and quality of life in Houston. Today's focus is going to be on Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG number 10, reducing social, economic, and political inequalities. As you all know, COVID-19 has deepened existing inequalities, hitting the poorest and most vulnerable communities the hardest. It has put a spotlight on economic inequalities and fragile social safety nets that leave vulnerable communities to bear the worst impacts of the crisis. We cannot achieve sustainable development and make the planet better for all if certain communities are excluded. So today, you'll hear from two guest speakers who are currently doing work around SDG 10. You'll be able to ask them questions about their projects so that you can better understand the initiatives, and then we'll break out into groups virtually here on Zoom so that you can further discuss. During the breakout rooms, you can also present your own projects or ideas to the group. So let's get started with our first speaker. We have Chris Valdez from Houston in Action. Chris leads the communications efforts of Houston in Action. They are a collective of organizations, institutions, and grassroots initiatives brought together by their shared mission to increase individual access to civic participation and to break down the systems that have historically limited access, especially for marginalized groups. Chris previously founded Matters of Public Interest and Laredo Street. He's currently focused on projects to increase public awareness of the connections between our region's air pollution and our health. And today, he will be sharing about the work of Houston in Action to decrease racial disparities in our county's voter registration turnout rates. So with that, Chris, I'll hand the floor over to you. You'll have 5 minutes to speak about the work that you're doing with Houston in Action. And then as he's speaking, if you guys have any questions that you think of in the moment, you can put them in the chat. Otherwise, when he's done, then you guys can unmute yourselves and ask your questions directly. Over to you, Chris.
Hey, cool. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Impact Hub, for for making this space with us today. Like Michelle mentioned, my name is Chris Valdez. I use he, him pronouns. And as Michelle mentioned, one of the big focuses for Houston in Action as a collective of nonprofits and community-based organizations this year is this election cycle is really to focus on how we can reduce the disparity, the racial disparity specifically, when it comes to voter registration rates and voter turnout rates. There's a giant gap when we look at the turnout for different groups within Houston, and that's because we know that systemically and historically, access has been blocked for certain groups of people, and that goes way, way back in this country's history, in the state's history, in the county's history. And so that's a big undertaking, and probably one of the biggest sort of tasks that Houston in Action is taking on this election cycle, and it starts actually next week. So we have cultivated some lists through various means. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. And what we've been doing is targeting those lists via SMS campaigns, we start SMS phase 1, pass 1 next week. That is coupled with supplementary phone calls. Of course, we rely on having phone numbers for these folks in order to reach them. For people we can't reach via phone or SMS, we actually we target them through social media paid ads. And so we're trying to reach those folks in as many ways as possible. And then for people who take action and this is kind of like in our initial, this is just voter registration. We're going to repeat all this for voter mobilization. But for those, for the voter registration, as you can imagine, we're emphasizing online strategies because of our limits when it comes to social distancing, physical distancing, and are actually building our own system to facilitate voter registration in Texas. If you don't know about it, please join me in the hangout, in the breakout room. It's pretty messed up the way that the hoops that someone has to jump through to register to vote in Harris County in Texas. So we had to build our own system to help facilitate that registration, and then we actively follow up with each of those people who took that action to make sure that once they receive an application to register to vote, that they in turn put it back in the mail, send it to the state, and then we repeat all of these functions again for actual election period, so early voting and for election day. Making sure people actually get out the door and have a way to get to the polls, or are able to vote by mail if they're eligible. So as you can imagine, it's going to require a huge mobilization of people, mainly volunteers. One of the systems that we don't currently have plans for, don't have a plan for, and could be an opportunity for maybe someone on this call, is actually developing the mechanism by which we recruit and manage our volunteers. Of course, systems already exist, but in our work, we've noticed that really for them for the systems that we need to work the best, oftentimes we have to create them ourselves, or build upon something else that someone else has created. Additionally, we're just looking for volunteers. If you like spending time on Hustle or spending time calling people and talking to them about issues that are important to them, and doing that kind of research, we also, and mobilization, we're always looking for folks to help in that way as well. It's easy to just stay connected on our website, houstonaction.org, and click the Stay Connected button and select volunteer opportunities. But then also, as I mentioned, we do come to the table with some lists, but these lists are incomplete, and especially among people who have lacked access, they don't end up in these lists. And so we're looking for creative strategies for reaching new people that we wouldn't have ordinarily reached. And that could mean, for instance, going to the state board's permitting data, like who applied to be a beautician this month or in the past 2 years, who has submitted their application, or they're told the post office that they're moving. These lists and this data exist all kinds of places, and for people who have moved or people who are submitting applications for new types of permits, oftentimes are also entering their eligibility to vote age, and so or entering kind of adulthood, and so they're oftentimes people who we would want to mobilize to vote as well. So we're looking for help in finding out what kinds of systems or lists, other types of lists might be able to be added to our mobilization strategies, and then generally just advising on the systems that we're building ourselves, including a online voter registration system, which is not truly online voter registration, as you can imagine. And then, as I mentioned, the volunteer management system. I hope I kept in my 5 minutes. I don't know if I did, but I'll stop there. I know I laid down a lot, and I look forward to talking to folks in the breakout room. 5 minutes. I don't know if I did, but I'll stop there. I know I laid down a lot, and I look forward to talking to folks in the breakout room.
Thanks, Chris. That was a lot. Does anyone have any clarifying questions? I don't think I saw any on the chat, but one thing I did want to just note on, Chris, of what you just mentioned is that I love that last piece that you just talked about, like data-driven, right? Data-driven innovation, and really focusing on, like, I've never even thought, I'm like, how can you use the list of the data that exists to figure out who else you need to be targeting and how do you target them? So that's definitely something that it's super interesting to me. And I guess if you think about the type of volunteer that you would need for something like that, what are some of those skills set that you're looking for in the volunteers to help you with this type of work?
Yeah, I think for the acquisition strategies or building our lists, I think that, you know, someone with experience of requesting data from usually a state or county, in particular Harris or Fort Bend, people who have experience with I guess cleaning data for another system, for instance, we would have to take that information and then apply it to our SMS system as well as our phone banking systems, and so those need to be able to be formatted correctly for that work. And then there's probably, I'm going to step out of my sort of intellectual bounds and offer that there are also some of our systems where our data is stored. Something called Civis is one of our hubs for data, and so you know, if someone was willing to take on something like that, there'd also be some technical, there'd be a technical side dealing with that particular sync connection.
That's awesome, thank you. And then we have just one other question for you on the chat, is if you're currently working with other similar organizations like Stacey Abrams, NGO, Fair Fight, to gain best practices.
So we're not actively partners with Fair Fight. However, they're definitely a group that we consider a resource, and anything that we can learn from their work and apply to our nonpartisan activities certainly be, something we're open to all people in shared causes. We just don't have a direct connection with Stacey Abrams. I wish I did.
That'll be another, anyone has a connect, drop that in the chat. Okay, thank you so much, Chris. We'll talk to you a little bit more in the breakout rooms. And then if you're interested in chatting with Chris during the breakout room, he'll be in breakout room number 2, but I'll go over those after our next speaker. So up next, we have Professor Marcia Johnson, who is a professor at the Thurgood Marshall School of Law. She has been a tenured professor since 1998 and served as interim associate dean and interim dean of the TSU Law School in 98 and in 99. She currently teaches civic procedure and community activism, social policy, and law. And she founded the Earl Crowell Institute in 1992, which she directed until 2012. Marcia also founded the Urban Research and Resource Center in 2017 and served as its director until 2019. She has published numerous articles and case books that has been active in community service. And today, she will be sharing about the Revive Third Ward project through TIER, which is the TSU Institute for Entrepreneurial and Economic Revitalization. So everyone, please welcome Marcia. And Marcia, I'll go ahead and pull your presentation so that we can begin.
All right. Well, thank you for introducing me to this group and for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you about my organization's project, which is called Revive Third Ward. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Third Ward community, would you give me slide 2? Oh, Michelle. It is an urban community. A majority of its residents are African American and low income. Third Ward is well situated geographically in that it is bordered by 2 universities, my university, Texas Southern, on its southern border, and the University of Houston to its east. Downtown Houston, or DoHo, and East Downtown, Edo, are on its northern border, and Midtown is to its west. Slide 3.
What's up?
Next slide, Michelle. The community is generally designated as a high crime area, but notwithstanding that, it is undergoing gentrification and revitalization efforts that include restoration of an economic corridor around the historic Emancipation Park. Slide 4.
Good.
My organization is called TIER. And as Michelle has told you, that is an acronym for the TSU Institute for Entrepreneurial and Economic Revitalization. TIER is entrepreneur Sam Stolben's brainchild. He took his idea to state NAACP President Gary Bledsoe, who brought it to me during the summer of 2018, and we began our work by early fall that same year. TIER is a small organization comprised of a 7-member board of directors and an executive director who also serves as a board member. Next slide, please. So our target market is Third Ward, which is the only area that we presently conduct our business. In addition to the descriptors I provided to you earlier, I also want you to know that Third Ward is a food desert. It suffers from low-performing public schools, and its businesses are generally very small operations that have a few resources to survive, even in the regular marketplace, let alone when burdened by a pandemic. But aside from these wicker tissues, the community is comprised of strong neighbors who fervently support the ward. It is on this backdrop of these two faces of Third Ward, one as a haven for violence and urban decay, and the other as a neighborhood brimming with beauty, history, and hope, that I present TIER's Revive Third Ward project. Next slide, please. In an effort to assist community residents during this difficult time, TIER has set our agenda on reviving Third Ward in 3 ways where the problems resulted from or were exacerbated by COVID-19. Here's what TIER is doing. Next slide. Third Ward has long been a food desert, the vastness of which has expanded due to the onslaught of COVID-related jobs losses, jobs furloughs, and jobs unavailability. TIER is buying a mobile grocery truck that we will use to provide food for community residents who find it even more difficult now to get to a grocery store, but of course continue to need staples like milk and bread and fresh fruit and vegetables that they're currently buying from high-priced convenience stores that are located in the areas. Instead of the vulnerable having to go to a location to get food, TIER's idea is that we will bring the food to them. But more than just providing food, TIER plans to play an active role in enhancing economic development through jobs creation. We expect this food delivery project to provide at least 5 jobs during year 1. We also plan to pay our employees a decent wage that includes employment benefits and health care insurance, so that not only will they have a job, but they will be in a position to reach and maintain housing stability. TIER is working on contracts with food vendors, including neighborhood gardens and local farms. This program works with existing community food service programs to expand access to food rather than to replace ongoing initiatives. At this stage in the project, we are soliciting donors and volunteers to help in our efforts. We expect our startup cost to be in the neighborhood of $185,000, which includes 6 months of salaries for the 5 employees. And we currently estimate the annual costs of operations to be around $250,000. We're still working out, of course, those details. We've gotten a commitment for donation of the truck, and we're working on a commitment for fixing the truck up so that it actually serves as a grocery truck. And we will know the status of our fundraising efforts for this particular part of the project in dollars and cents tomorrow. Our goal is to formally launch the truck in September. Next slide. Public schools in the Third Ward area usually earn around, on a good day, a C-. There has been a long-standing academic performance gap, which has already begun to expand due to or under the strains of COVID-19. Next slide, please. To help address the academic gap for students who will be at home without laptops, Wi-Fi, or school supplies, TIER is in talks with the Houston Independent School District Superintendent's Office to target the 4 non-charter public schools in Third Ward to help supply the much needed technology, PPEs, school supplies, and other things that the students may need, including food, during the first 6 weeks of the school year when classes will be conducted virtually. Now, there are approximately 2,500 students in grades K through 12 in public non-charter schools in the community. And we know that not all of the students will need everything, but we have allocated about $200 per student to reach an estimate of the cost of such program, which is around $200,000 for the cumulative program, which includes the web device, the internet service, school supplies, PPEs, food, which consists of breakfast and lunch every day for 5 days, for every day of the week for 6 weeks. Healthcare needs, to some degree, housing needs. We're not going to really talk about that very much, and the social and emotional needs that the students and their families may have. But TIER is not alone in these efforts. For example, area churches that are led by the Trinity Methodist Church will provide facilities for students to attend on-site, in-class room instruction in socially distanced environments that are cleaned regularly to meet CDC standards. We will also be working with area professionals to provide for the social and emotional needs that students and their families are enduring, which I'm sure that many of you heard under the strain of COVID has been expanding exponentially in a lot of the vulnerable communities. One of the concerns that we do have, and we have not yet addressed, is how to keep older children who are in middle and high schools occupied and staying out of trouble and otherwise out of harm's way during this time that schools will not be in session. So I'd love to hear some of your ideas on that. Next slide, please. And the third component of this project has to do with businesses. Businesses across the world have suffered tremendously during this pandemic, but Black-owned businesses in America have been among the most severely impacted. TIER has launched a program that provides loans and grants to these struggling businesses and is also preparing to provide additional resources to help businesses apply for federal grants and to improve their entrepreneurial outlook and business bottom lines. To date, TIER has provided about $250,000 in grants and or loans and are in talks with some area businesses and business support centers to continue that effort. Next slide. To continue these and other efforts, TIER has a number of needs: money, of course, supplies, resources, volunteers, ideas, research. Our work is done under strict CDC and county COVID-19 guidelines. I encourage you to contact us. You can, of course, contact me in the small breakout sessions, but even after today, to contact us by contacting me at 713-313-1027, or by contacting our executive director, Barbara Bratter, or me through the emails that are shown on the screen.
Thank you, Marcia. That was an extremely well laid out project, and I love the three main components there. For the sake of time, I think we'll go ahead and break out into the rooms.